brother teacher here. I want to talk and discuss the subject of ground fighting or jiu-jitsu on the ground as related to other strategies or fighting systems that may encounter this type of fighter. A fighter, in other words, that's a grappler, or someone who studies Brazilian or Japanese jiu-jitsu, it doesn't matter, or any form of grappling for that matter. There's a misunderstanding and misconception about how strong a grappler is. Let's understand this before we begin and go any further, that there are various aspects of fighting when we are pitted against another human being one-on-one. No weapons other than the human body. There's striking with hands, feet, elbows, and there's gouging and biting, and there's pressure points. There are throws, there are holds and locks, and joint manipulations. For the most part, that covers the gamut of what fighters could potentially do to one another when engaged. Now, as it relates to a jiu-jitsu guy, let's just use a guy for example, that is very good in grappling or ground fighting versus someone who may not have that skill set. It doesn't mean that the grappler is greater than the karate fighter or the kung fu person or the Muay Thai fighter. It just means that that is something that they spend a lot of time on in their dojo, on the ground, what they call ground mat work or ground work or mat work, ground time. It could be called a whole lot of things, but anyway, the time that you spend on the ground, on the mat, on your back, a lot of times is what determines how effective you would be in that situation against someone else on the ground. And it also depends on the other person's skill as it relates to their particular fighting art. No, I know I'm sort of rambling, but this is what I'm getting at. Just because someone studies jiu-jitsu and they're good on the ground doesn't mean that they can beat a karate or kung fu or another jiu-jitsuan for that matter, or an aikidoist or a Muay Thai guy or some guy that studies a Bando or whatever on the ground. It doesn't necessarily mean that. So let's wrap our brains around that concept. And the reason it doesn't necessarily mean that is this. What I have observed over the years, especially with Brazilian jiu-jitsu, is that their mainstay is grappling, being on the ground. It's wonderful. That's a great thing if you want to exploit just that. But understand this, to those that may not know this, when jiu-jitsu originally came into existence, there were rules, R-Y-U'-S, rules, which means schools in Japanese, schools of jiu-jitsu. There were some schools of jiu-jitsu that specialized in striking. There were some schools or rules that specialized in ground fighting. There were some schools that specialized in weapons. There were some schools that specialized in pressure points. There were some schools that specialized in more than one of those particular categories. All right? So, what rule are you a descendant of? Are you just the aspect of jiu-jitsu that only does ground fighting and grappling? If you are, you're in trouble. I believe, and not just because I said it, but because I have almost 50 years in the martial arts, not just one particular category or school of thought, but almost 50 years. And that may not mean anything to anyone else, but I'm telling you to listen to wisdom. I've studied jiu-jitsu, karate, judo, kung fu, boxing, and then some. And I understand this. So what happens most of the time, 99.9% of the time that a grappler beats the other fighter is because the other fighter panics. Why do they panic? They panic because, number one, they have little to no experience on the ground grappling. That's the main reason they panic. If you were to take a person in the street down, in a street encounter, to the ground, first thing people do is freeze up when they go down. And if you're a good grappler, the person that took them down, you're going to exploit that individual's weaknesses. And chances are you're going to reign superior in that encounter. But this is what I want to say to you karate guys. I want to say this to you kung fu guys, and you other Ju-jitsu guys, or you other boxers and Muay Thai guys, and whatever your other studies are as far as martial arts is concerned. Understand this. A grappler, a proficient grappler, cannot beat you when they begin to engage you if you maintain, number one, your presence of mind. You remain calm, and you must practice these things in your school as well for them to translate into a real situation. And the other thing is that you must always continue to strike from standing to the ground. But what happens oftentimes with a lot of you guys is that once you're going down to the ground, you freeze up, like I said before. And when you freeze up, you begin to only function on this strength thing. And that is what the Jujitsuan, or the ground fighter, or the grappler is going to exploit on you. Your tenseness, your being rigid, you're not knowing what to do. That's the only way that they can beat you. But one thing you notice about a lot of these grapplers is that they don't strike. It means one of a couple things. Number one, they don't strike in their training hall. They don't strike in their system. Or two, they believe so much in their grappling ability they don't feel like they have to. But here's the catch-22. When they're not striking you, they're open. Their main goal is to try and submit you, is to try to choke you out. Understand that. And when they do this, if you watch the UFC, the earlier fights, if you watch the MMA fights, if you watch the Pride fights, what you will see is that they are exposed. But then again, we're talking about rules and regulations in these organizations too. You can't gouge, you can't bite, you can't do this and that. Okay? You have a referee standing there that can break it up. But in a real fight, ladies and gentlemen, understand this. When a grappler takes you to the ground, if it goes to the ground, if he or she is hell-bent on submitting you, they're exposed. You have pressure points. You have vulnerable spots on the human body that are always exposed. So why are you not exploiting those? So this is what I'm trying to tell you, all of the other people that are not necessarily studying grappling. Start incorporating this in your training. When you go into the ground, you and your students, start incorporating as you're going down that you're striking and you're hitting pressure points going down. You're remember the eyes, the nose, certain parts of the neck. I won't point these things out specifically because there's a lot of people watching the video that are going to take advantage of what I'm saying, and then they're going to use it inappropriately. But you know what I'm talking about. Start using the vulnerable spots of the body. And this is the no-no. This is what you need to stop doing, ladies and gentlemen that are martial arts instructors. Stop freezing up. Encourage your students to not freeze up when they're being taken to the ground. If you need some judo experience, some jiu-jitsu experience as far as grappling is concerned, and you don't have it in your system, you don't have it in your school or style at the present, You need to incorporate that. You need to find somebody that's going to introduce ukini, how to fall. You need someone that's going to teach you some of the basic locks and holds, some of the strangulation holds, and so forth. You need someone to teach you those things so you can incorporate some of the basic things involved in grappling into your program. You're doing yourself a disservice if you don't do this. Just like Ju-jitsu, or the grappling aspect of Jiu-jitsu, or any other type of grappling art, just as they are limited because they're not using striking as they should, the karate guy, the kung fu guy, or any other martial arts system, taekwondo or whatever, you are handicapped as well when you don't have the grappling in your system. And so what I'm saying ultimately is this: you have to be well-rounded. I'm out. It's Brother Teacher.